welcome to our first coffee chat. I guess that's what we're calling this. This is just Friday morning, drink some coffee and talk to some different people and talk about different things within fitness and health and wellness. So I'm excited this morning to have on a dear friend of mine and my brother-in-law, Reese Shirey. Reese is the owner and operator of Turbo Coffee, centered in Florence, Alabama, and they also have a location in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I've known Reese for, I don't know, probably 20 years now.
It's been a while, yeah, since we were kids.
Yeah. And Reese and I were best friends in college, and he is now part of my family. So it's really cool to have you on. So Reese, just quickly tell us a little bit about your business. Who is Turbo Coffee? And yeah.
Well, I mean, Turbo Coffee started out as me. The government sees me as Turbo Coffee, I guess. But we've grown into, it started out as just me. Started out as an espresso bar in the back of, my brother, Austin, has a barbershop called Greasy Hands. And when he moved back from New York City, he started the barbershop. And then we kind of took some ideas from New York that we saw there with combining spaces, in big cities like New York and obviously Atlanta. Real estate's so expensive, you have to kind of maximize your footprint. And so we saw a lot of businesses sharing spaces there, which, is not very common here in Florence, where real estate's cheap. You have a lot of space to grow and expand. And, but, to save money starting up, we combined our businesses in one space. And so I started as a small espresso bar in the back of his barbershop, which was an idea that we saw repeated a few times in New York. And so that kind of helped both of us in the beginning with, just sharing costs, and it allowed us to grow kind of organically with kind of money that we had saved up on our own. After about a year, we grew into a bigger space, still combined though, still an espresso bar. And then in the second year at the end of the second year, we were able to kind of grow out of the barbershop, and we're open a full cafe. So that would have been about we started in 2015. So by 2017, we had our own full shop. We were serving, coffee. We were doing acai bowls, a lot of health related food. So we do a lot of gluten-free. We do a lot of vegan stuff, stuff that a lot of people in Florence were kind of wanting to have, but in a city of 40,000 people, there's not a lot of health centered type places. It's just pretty basic stuff, to be honest. And so kind of what we were doing was pretty unique, and so it really took off. Especially, honestly, we're Turbo Coffee, but we do more smoothie bowls than anything else. That really hit off, back in 2015 or so. It was a concept that I was visiting Kyle actually in California in 2011. Was the first time I ever had an acai bowl. I had no idea what that was, and so that kind of stuck with me for 6 years. I didn't end up developing it until 6 years later, but it always kind of stuck with me. I was like, that would be really neat because I'd never seen anything like that concept. Right. And so by 2018, we had purchased a local roaster, a small family. It was just a husband and wife team, and their family was growing, and so they were kind of trying to get out of the roasting game. And roasting our own coffee was something that we always wanted to do. And so we expanded our business there. We purchased their roaster and the little business that they had, and we kind of brought it under our umbrella and went from Turbo Coffee to what is now Turbo Coffee Roasters. Yeah. And in that same year, 2018 was a big year for us because we bought a roaster, and then we expanded into a second location in Tuscaloosa at the end of the fall of 2018, which is obviously where you and I went to school, so we had a lot of interest in going back there. Just because, I mean, Tuscaloosa is just a boom town right now. I mean, it's just the whole city's under construction. It feels like.
Yep.
Just with apartments going up everywhere. I mean, they've expanded enrollment to 50,000. It was 32, I think, when we were there. So, I mean, it's just 50,000 students is a massive school. So it was kind of a no-brainer. And that's where we are today. We got 2 locations, and we roast coffee and do a lot of online stuff.
So talk real quickly, because I think it's really interesting. Talk real quickly about Florence. Florence is a really unique area in Alabama. A lot of people don't know about Florence, but it's really a culture capital in at least Alabama. And I think one of the things that you guys have done that's really unique is you took concepts from New York or different places that you would visit, and you would bring them into cities in Alabama that really didn't have that. And you guys kind of had a captive audience because of that, because nobody was really doing what you guys are doing. And I just think, I'm drinking Turbo coffee right now. I got my Turbo shirt on. I just think what you guys have done from a branding, marketing standpoint is really the thing that has separated you guys within that space. But talk a little bit about Florence, and then we'll get into a few kind of other questions.
Yeah, Florence. I mean, we grew up in Muscle Shoals, which is just right across the river. I mean, it's basically the same town. It's just we kind of have, if Atlanta were separated into the neighborhoods, and those would be their own cities, that's pretty much how our area is. So it's basically like one big city. It's just not the same city. And so Muscle Shoals is right across the river from Florence, and so obviously that's a big music town, and there's a lot of history there. And so Florence kind of is the more major city in a way, and so they get all the attention really. But it's just kind of like a little tucked away corner in North Alabama where we're an hour or more away from any interstate, and so we don't have a lot of major traffic coming through our town. But it's kind of like a creative little capital in our state, because we got Billy Reed, which is a fairly big clothing designer, which is kind of random. And so we have a lot of neat things going on for such a small town. And so that obviously helped us from bringing these new ideas in. That helped us from the standpoint of people are open to ideas here. It's not like we're a small town in Alabama that's kind of closed off to ideas, or so that obviously has been very beneficial to our business. And just from a branding standpoint, I've always, I love branding design. I love design of any sort. So the design of our brand, and kind of the image of our brand, and all that was really important to me from day one. Creating a brand that people wanted to be associated with. I mean, that's nothing new, and that's nothing new, unique to me. Starbucks did the same thing. I mean, people want to take pictures with that green mermaid cup. I mean, but creating a brand like that is not easy. I mean, people try to do it and it doesn't work. So I don't know. I think we had a little success there. I think we do have I don't know. I'm not used to tooting my own horn.
Yeah. No,
but
I think your brand is awesome. I think what you guys have done is really, really unique, given the landscape and the culture of some of those environments. But I mean, like Florence it's pretty crazy that Billy Reed, like male fashion designer of the year several years in a row, lives in Florence.
He lives
the
like 2
Rolling
blocks from our
Stones
shop.
recorded in Muscle Shoals. So all major musicians in the 60s and 70s recorded out of there. So it really is a culture capital, and you guys have just taken advantage of that. So kudos to you, man. I'm really proud of what you guys have done, and you guys make my favorite coffee. I just finished up my last bag, so I got to order a new one. So
cool.
But I think your journey is pretty unique in the fact that you started out pre-med.
I did, yeah. Those were terrible days. I would like lock myself in our dorm room, on Sunday afternoons, and just study biology. It was the worst.
You were miserable.
I know, I hated it. So I was pre-med for 2 years. So I basically wasted 2 years of my college on something that I wouldn't use.
But then talk about, this is what was cool, is that Alabama had a program called New College where you can design your own major, and you designed your own entrepreneurship major.
Yeah. So after 2 years, I was like, this is not what I want to do. I hate this. Because I don't have a scientific brain at all. It was something that I thought I wanted to do. But once I actually started studying it all, I was like, I can't even understand this stuff.
Yeah.
And so obviously all that science was not for me. So I wanted to do something on the complete opposite spectrum, was to create something. And looking back, I would have done some things differently. But I didn't know a whole lot back then about starting a business or creating a brand or design or anything. I would have taken a lot of classes in design, to be honest, but I didn't take any of those. So I've had to outsource a lot of that stuff that I could have, I wish I would have been able to do myself. But anyway, I started making ice cream in college, during school. And then, we were swimming 25 to 30 hours a week. So in what little spare time I had, I bought some equipment and started making my own ice cream. And that sort of transitioned into what I do now.
You almost got shut down by the local government.
Yeah.
Reese would make ice cream and hand deliver pints to people, and he got shut down. Got a letter from the government.
I got a letter of cease and desist because I didn't know any of the health code laws. I was just making ice cream and selling it. And so I got a cease and desist letter sent to my tiny little apartment in Tuscaloosa. I was like, guess this is illegal.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But it's cool. Like you don't know like how those experiences sort of shaped sort of what you do now.
All of that
those
shaped
were all
what I do now.
I
I had no idea that I would end up in coffee. It's just as I graduated and I continued to kind of explore what interest. My dad was an entrepreneur. It's just kind of in my blood is to run my own business, and kind of I love creating things. And so I kind of figured that out in college, and my interest grew, and I fell in love with coffee and the science behind it, and just, I don't know, the beauty of just how simple coffee is. But it's not that simple. It's a really complex thing.
Right.
It's a beautiful product. So
it's really cool, man. All right, I want to kind of transition a little bit. So Reese was a fairly elite swimmer, 2-time Olympic trialist, 2008 and 2012, 200 back in 2012. What's up, Sarah? Back down there.
She's carrying kids around.
What's up? So 2012 was 200 meter back, and then 2008 was 100. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then after swimming, after college, you transitioned into CrossFit. Talk about that transition and sort of what you've appreciated about two totally different sports.
Yeah. So when I was in college, I knew a girl that I had grown up around. She was about my brother's age, so she was a few years older. So she was super into this thing called CrossFit, and it really only started around 2007, and it didn't even expand until a couple of years later. And so about the time we were in college, it really blew up. But I didn't know much about it, and I thought it was this kind of cultish thing that kind of weird people did that were super hardcore about weightlifting. And then, we didn't lift a whole lot of weights as a swimmer. Most of the weights we did were for kind of prehab or recovery or, injury prevention stuff. And so I had no idea really what Olympic lifting was. I'd never watched Olympic lifting as a sport. But after, I had been competing in a sport very seriously for almost 20 years. I started swimming when I was 4, and I started racing at 4. I mean, I kind of took some swim lessons, and they kind of threw me in the water. And so I was competing at the age of 4, and I never stopped competing until I graduated college. And so that was a kind of a big shock. I loved I loved competing. I didn't really enjoy the grueling. I did enjoy it in a sense, like the grueling workouts that we had, the long
Yeah.
workouts. I did like it, but they were boring. You know, your face is underwater and you don't get to talk to people. Swimming's not a very social sport. Uh, so I missed, there was kind of like this void in my life after that, in a way, because how do you just turn off your competitive?
Yeah.
You know, you lose that, and where do you put those energies? You know, I did put a lot of my competitive energy into starting a business, but I still, you know, loved working out, and going to just like a regular gym, lifting weights in front of a mirror really wasn't what I, you know, that didn't translate from swimming at all. And so I was like, well, you know, this CrossFit thing seems kind of cool. So I started that a couple of years after, probably 2014 or 15. And I realized, you know, what, just the kind of, that it is a competitive sport. You can treat it like a sport, even, you know, even if you have no aspirations of real competing, there's like a false reality of like, I'm going to compete one day, and therefore I need to be in the fittest shape of my life. Right. That may never happen, but at least that drives you every day to, you know, be in shape. And I like the whole aspect of like, swimming is such a narrow, concentrated focus, whereas CrossFit, I mean, it really made me fall in love with weightlifting, not just like, you know, like, not like bodybuilding, like genuinely like gaining strength and then applying that to metabolic conditioning. I love where those two things meet. I don't know. It's just, it's really fun. I love it. I mean, it's really, I've taken that kind of same passion I had for training and swimming, and I train in CrossFit, you know. And again, it may never come to anything, and that's fine. But again, there's like the false reality that keeps me going, you know.
Sure. All right. Well, let's do some just kind of rapid fire questions. How bad were we at squatting in college?
Oh my God. You know, thinking back, I don't know if I ever even spent any amount of time below parallel.
Never.
Like, you know, like, and now like with CrossFit, everything is like leg relay. Everything has to do with squatting. I mean, if in CrossFit, it's so like leg based, which is totally, I mean, swimmers have these big upper bodies and like skinny little legs, and you know. So no, I was terrible, and I'm still terrible at squatting because of my 20 years of swimming. I have no posterior chain.
Well, anti-butt.
Yeah, exactly.
Who taught you how to squat?
Basically, I jumped into a CrossFit gym, and, you know, I didn't, this is the downside of CrossFit, is a lot of boxes don't take the time they need to develop proper technique. They just kind of, hey, squat this weight and go up in these percentages if you can. So I had to deal with a lot of knee pain just because of my swimming background. I didn't have I still don't, but I'm way better now, but I didn't have a lot of glute strength. All my strength is in my quads, just from backstroke kicking. It's all you're using your quads. And so I had to, squatting really hurt for a while, just because I was loading my quads and I didn't know what was going on. So I had to I still do a lot of glute strengthening. So I just kind of, I learned proper squatting just from Instagram, honestly, following a lot of great athletes and taking a lot of advice from social media, which is a great thing.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, it's funny how like in swimming, you do it for 20 years and you'd have your kind of regular old injuries, your shoulder injuries and stuff. And then you start doing a new sport that actually requires you to use muscle groups that you've never used.
Yeah.
And you realize, oh, I'm really bad at this.
Yeah. You get into trouble really quick.
Last question I have for you. How can we support your business? What can people do? Kind of drop a line. What can people do to support you guys kind of through this time?
Yeah. So we have a lot of, you know, we obviously, our main online thing is bags of roasted coffee, which has been, we've seen a kind of a huge increase in that over the past month, because people aren't out and about, and they still want to drink coffee, and so they order coffee online. And so that's been awesome. That's a great way that people have been able to still support coffee shops, is ordering online. So that's the main way. I mean, we right now we have like a t-shirt thing going on. That's just to kind of support our employees, to still give them hours, and so we can still pay them. We don't want to lay anybody off. We have a pretty small staff, but between two shops, it's we still want to support our guys.
Yep. People can find you guys at turbocoffee.com.
turbocoffeeroasters.com.
turbocoffeeroasters.com.
Yeah, we got Instagram, which pretty much from Instagram you can get to anywhere, our website or products or whatever.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, man. We're gonna pull on Lauren here, and she and I are gonna chat. And if you want to hang out. You might learn some stuff. We got Marcus, who is a CrossFit coach, actually.
Oh, cool.
Chime in too. Sorry, I don't know if you knew that you were going to chime in on that, Marcus, but figured I'd pull from your expertise as well. So, Reese, if you want to mute yourself, and then Lauren, go ahead and unmute. So, Lauren, question for you: why should people squat?
Why should people squat? That is a good question. Well, we lubricate our joints, right? And we increase our range of motion and our flexibility. And as we've all seen now and as Reese said, we were taught to only squat to parallel, and dropping our bottom below our knee level is important to open up, get our hips stronger, and to really access our glutes. And everybody's glutes are weak because we sit for so long, and we compensate with all the other muscles, like he was saying, our quads or our low back, and we get back pain and knee pain and all of that. So squatting below parallel is important. And I think, you wrote that blog where you asked your clients, okay, when were you told to, how were you told to squat, and when did you graduate from high school, I think, right?
Yeah. So, and I actually have a picture from that blog pulled up. Because I just, and Marcus, I'd be really curious to hear your comments on this too. It seems that between the years of 1980 and 2000, everybody was taught to squat without your knees going over toes. And there was a research study they did in the 80s that looked at torque on the knee versus torque on the knee in a squat. And what they found is that torque increases at the knee by about 7 to 10 times when the knee translates forward over the toes. So the shank angle is more acute. And so they said, great, awesome. Nobody should squat with their knees over their toes. But what they failed to look at was what happens at the hip when you don't translate the knee forward. And so then Fry et al. In 2003 then came back and took that original study and said, let's kind of dive into this and actually look at this. And so I'm going to share my screen here, but this was one of the pictures from it where they started measuring, looking at people and actually blocking their ability to translate the knee forward versus being able to get the knee over the toes. And what they found with that was that if you don't let the knee translate over the toes, you're going to increase torque at the hip by about a factor of 1,000. And so it's just really interesting that there was a whole generation of people that were kind of taught to squat improperly. So Marcus, was that your kind of experience too, growing up, and kind of what you've seen with a lot of the athletes you train?
Yeah, I mean, I at first was receiving coaching from, really great lifting coaches back in high school. And they were also saying, don't let your knees go forward. And, they were working with, professional NFL athletes, and I'd see them on the other side of the gym, and they'd be coaching the same thing. So as time moves forward, our knowledge improves. So, to speak to that exact study, I mean, it always made me feel kind of odd to hear, okay, don't let your knees come forward, don't let your knees come forward. Even in, high school and into college, it loads the knees, it loads the knees. And I'm like, well, then why are, we're squatting? Like, we're going to load our knees. We're going to load our our joints. And, I think it kind of leans to the bias of frailty of our body, or potential assuming frailty. Like, oh, it's increasing torque on the knees. No, like, well, you put 225 on your back. Like, it's going to increase torque on your knees. And that's what you want. Like, that's how strength increases. So the assumption of like, okay, if torque increases, that shouldn't happen. I remember looking at that and I was like, that doesn't really quantify how resilient our bodies really are if it's progressed appropriately.
Yeah, man, that's such a good way to put it. And it's so simple. Like, thinking about, what's the point of lifting a weight? It's to make us more resilient.
You want that torque. That's why you're doing it. Like, so, yeah.
It's really funny, but there's just these myths, and that, a lot of times people do these things and they don't even realize why they do it. They were told to do it a certain way. So I think that's where having a really good coach and having expertise is really crucial to helping people. So this is a question for you, Marcus, and I guess it's kind of a vague question, but why is it important that we use our full range of motion when we do squat?
And I love vague questions, so don't. Those are the fun ones, I think. Got a room to have some fun with them. Why do you use full range of motion? Is the same reason why you would want to really master your anything. I mean, if you want to get really good at the coffee business, you probably want to know every little aspect of it. And if you want to get good at your shoulder or your hip, you should probably use every little aspect of it. If you want to be average at it, well, you could probably use a little bit less, or half as much, and you'll be okay at it. And it's, I think, the philosophy of how much do you want to know about your body? Well, you can figure it out, get to that end range, and you'll learn some stuff. So that's why I really think it's good to go as much range as you are possible within your own capacity.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that, and Lauren alluded to this too, we're a culture that just sits, and we don't go below parallel often. But you look at other cultures around the world, and in Asian cultures, they're in a deep squat all the time, waiting on the bus stop, going to the bathroom. And we see that a reduction in prevalence of arthritis in those populations when they're actually using their body the way their body was designed to move. So I think you're right. It's about sort of holding on and maintaining, and not just maintaining, but getting better at the things that we're capable of doing. So, Lauren, any questions, comments from you? Anything that you were kind of wanting to talk about, open up?
Your point about, just squatting, because I started, doing more lifting this year, and more squats, more kettlebell swings, trying to really hip hinge. And then it really showed all my weaknesses. Once I had to turn on my glutes, then I started to realize that I was overcompensating with my back or with my hip. So it's allowed me to see where my imbalances are, and then kind of problem solve why I've had issues in my knee for years and things like that. And so as I work through them, it's fun to kind of use yourself as a case study, kind of like Reese was saying when he practiced squatting. It was like he was learning on his own body how inefficient he was at certain movements. So yeah, I mean, just teaching and just for me to teach myself how to squat, it's actually taken me a good 6 months to a year to drop below parallel to where I can do it and do it well. Not leaning forward with my trunk to get up and trying to keep an upright trunk with that. So it's hard. I mean, when you've not done it, it's really hard to relearn that. So it's important, it's just a functional movement that we all need to get good at.
What do you say to people who say, well, my doctor said I shouldn't do any squats, I'm getting too old for that? What do you kind of say to that?
Well, I mean, our joints are cartilage, right? And our cartilage gets nutrition through movement. So if we limit the mobility in those joints, you're actually wearing the joint out more, because, if your knee is a hinge joint, right, and we're only moving it in a small range of motion, you're wearing it out in a certain area because you're not moving it through the entire range of motion that it's designed to do. So it's, we say motion is the lotion, but, and it's truly the medicine that keeps our joints healthy. So, I push them and try to, guide them into that, the mechanics and the process of getting there.
Yeah. One thing I'll comment on was, back to what Reese and I were kind of laughing about is I didn't know how to squat, and I was never taught. And what I was taught was not great. And I was really bad at it because I was tall, I was gangly, I was lanky, but I was a sprinter. And so we were required to lift heavier. Heavy for swimmers is, light for most actual, land athletes. And improper squatting was really the thing that took me out for a season. I had a pretty bad radiculopathy disc injury from squatting too much. I loaded up way too much weight. I put way too much torque on my back and on my hip, and I didn't translate my knees forward, and it's followed me for now 10 years. I mean, I still fight that injury of 10 years ago, all because of a squat. I remember the day, I remember the repetition when it happened, where I said, oh, something bad just happened, right? And it freaked me out, and it sent me kind of on this journey where I was in pain for years and years and years. And but the interesting thing about that was that once some of the acuity kind of came down and I got some really good guidance and actually learned more, not only about the pathophysiology, about my own physiology, but I started kind of applying that and getting good education, good instruction. I stopped getting scared of that movement again. Squatting was the thing that ultimately got me feeling better. So it was when I learned how to do that movement again that my back actually started feeling better, because I avoided load for years because I was scared to hurt myself again. And so for me, that's really helpful for me with working with clients, because I feel like I can relate to them in that aspect. To say, I've been there, I've had that back injury, and this was the thing that actually helped me. So for me, it's the thing that I kind of hang my hat on to say, what can be the thing that can harm us can actually be the thing that can heal us too.
And I kind of want to speak to that a little bit, because what you were saying before about, physicians, surgeons saying don't squat, it's hard to teach someone how to squat. It's complex. Their job is not to do that. Their job is to, get to the next patient, because they have a limited amount of time, and get their surgery done and move on to the next one. And to actually teach someone the actual progression, how to squat, and the proper way to do it, reasons, and all the different progressions, could take a year or two. And to actually, I understand how physicians can just say, hey, just don't do it, because it's hard. It really is difficult. And unless you have the willing attitude to learn and to progress and to actually figure out how to do it, and get lucky enough to find someone who knows how to teach you, and then to have the funds to be able to pay that person to actually have them teach you. I understand why physicians would kind of default and say that's really, and also they're not exactly taught on how to teach someone how to squat, nor do they know how either. So, or at least a lot of them. So that's where a big role as physical therapy, as a physical therapist, I believe that I stand, as well as you guys clearly do, and that to be that sounding, that megaphone, and saying, hey, you do have an injury, and that is a pathology, but then to be able to provide information, coaching, patience, and a service to them, and saying, hey, you can get your body back still. Because there's an inherent risk if you don't. If you let it go, you won't be able to bend your knee as much. You won't be able to lift that thing as much. Now, if you, of course, do try to learn how to squat, of course, there's an inherent risk with that too. I mean, there's a risk with anything. You walk outside, there's a risk, especially in today's climate. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. But just having that attitude of saying, hey, to provide that service to so many people who have had injuries, such as yourself with a back injury, and saying, we can teach you how to get out of this. It's just going to take some time.
Beautifully said. I think that's a really good spot to kind of end things. I love that.
Well, Jake, I have a question. Do you want to demonstrate a squat real quick?
I want to.
Cole.
Yeah, do you want to?
My back is barking this morning, but I can
Your
try.
back is barking? All right, I won't make you.
Yeah, I can do it. I'll open it up to the gallery too. So let me pivot this. Marcus is gonna just face palm.
No.
Can y'all see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
So when I was taught how to squat was don't push knees over toes, right? And you can see my hands going really far out in front of me because I'm having to counterbalance all the weight that's going backward.
Totally.
This is a really long femur, right? Totally. And the thing that I'm working on with my squat is actually learning how to maintain that sort of anterior pelvic tilt.
Yep.
I'm not flexible in my hip and pelvis. So the thing I'm working on is actually getting low, letting my knee translate, but getting in that position where I can actually get my hips below my knees.
Yep.
And actually get comfortable in that position, but still working on actually maintaining that kind of anterior pelvic tilt. But the biggest thing for me is actually learning about clearing my hips to actually open up my legs so that my hips can't actually get below parallel. And so actually like pulling the knees apart a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two things I really focus on with people. So what would you comment on for that?
For me, are you asking me?
Sure.
Oh, okay. That was beautiful. Getting comfortable in various foot positions and various knee positions, being able to squat with knees forward, being able to squat with, feet wide, feet narrow. There's a zillion different ways to squat.
Yeah.
I think the less rigidity initially is important to let people discover their own biomechanics, because someone's femur is going to be longer, shorter, hip socket, ankle mobility, all these things play in. So as soon as they kind of get comfortable with playing, like you just demonstrated right there, get comfortable, have fun, get down to different positions, discover that range. Then as load increases, so does strict technique. If you start loading someone up and they're still kind of discovering that position, nope. Yeah, discover that range, have fun, get down there in any way that's comfortable, and then once the load starts to improve, then you could talk about, okay, here's some rules that we really got to follow.
Like it. Let's open up to Q&A. We'll allow a few minutes for that, and then questions for either myself, Marcus, Lauren, or even if you guys have questions for Reese about his business and a little bit about his story too.
I'm going to unmute some people if they want to ask questions. There we go. Anybody have questions? No?
I can ask, it's a little off but for Marcus. Have you read any about the CrossFit Games moving to like a virtual competition this year?
I've been just seeing whispers.
I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that, or if you guys were doing any sort of like virtual workouts together at y'all's gym.
There's really the gym's been shut down, and everything's virtual right now. So they're doing workouts through a few coaches just posting workouts online if you want to join a video session, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Okay.
What about,
I have a question.
I was going to, sorry, go ahead, Reese.
So probably for the past month or so, I've been dealing with I kind of have some, I don't know what you call it, maybe chronic knee pain. I was dealing with some patellar stuff early on in CrossFit just because of all that, the lack of knowledge, but I've kind of gotten over some of that. But in the same knee, I deal with some, it's like above my kneecap, but kind of over towards the IT band, but almost like quad tendon area, kind of where I showed you that picture, Jake.
Yep.
And it's only like, it doesn't hurt. It's only like in a deep, like front squat, even like as deep as I can go in a back squat, there's not a whole lot of pain. But if you start front squatting, now that can really get deep. And if you're under like a really heavy clean, that's going to force you as low as you can go. And so I tend to get some really sharp pain in there from time to time. And I don't know if it's like, I guess it may be like, I got some needling done, and that seems to help. Like they'll needle like my piriformis, that like really helps my knee pain, but it comes back by like that afternoon. So I don't know, they give me, the PT I'm working with is good. He seems to know some good stuff, but I don't know. It kind of it just comes back. Like it'll go away if I'm like doing some banded hip stuff, or really trying to like focus on my glutes with kettlebell swings to like prime it before I squat. But it just comes back, by that afternoon. It almost like flares up again. I don't know.
Does it come back if you're not squatting, or only when you squat?
If I were to like just, 90% of the time I can just like get into a deep air squat, like to squat down and like clean my tire if I'm like washing my car, and there's no pain. But like recently, like I can't do that without like very sharp pain in my right knee, or it's not it's above my knee kind of.
Yeah. More like quad tendon. You had said.
Yeah. I just don't really know how to, fix something like that.
Yeah.
That's probably that would take kind of weeks, and that's kind of a very difficult question. But
it would take some digging into. But I think my perception of that for you is something you already alluded to was you spent 20 years on your quads. Back kicking, dolphin kicking, and your quads are massive. So you have a proclivity to use your quads probably more so than the average Joe. That might be an imbalance issue, but I also don't know enough about some of the specifics behind some of the Olympic lifts that you do that would cause that type of issue. It could be a muscle length issue in the quad, that when you're in that position, you're not
even not lifting. Like I just, it's only been going on about a month, and I used to be able to just do pistol squats as deep as possible, and it, just rep out all day long. But now it's just like, if I try to load that knee, it's just like, holy cow, I may not be able to get back up.
Yep.
And there wasn't like a specific, I wasn't like cleaning one day and I'm like, oh man, that hurt. It just kind of happened over time. And it's just kind of, I just miss being able to do an air squat, to like squat down and pick up my child and it not like hurt to get back up.
Yeah.
Not even related to like, I mean, sure, I would like to be able to back squat as heavy as I could, but I just miss being able to do but and some days are worse than others. I don't know. It just feels like it feels like an IT band thing, or I don't know.
Yeah. Marcus, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, in the pictures he sent me, it does seem to be like a lateral quad tendon. My guess is probably a tendinopathy or tendinitis, but it's more mechanical in nature in that it's only with specific movements.
I would just want to look at his Thomas test, see if you can dominate that, because you have to be able to not only do it passively, but can you do it actively? Can you actually lay on your stomach and have your glutes fire, lift your knee up, and actually have your knee not at just 90, but can you really win at the Thomas test, not just supine and letting that leg drop off? So now we're talking PT lingo, but basically making sure your thigh is flexible enough to handle the amount of force that you're putting onto your knee. If it's, you're asking your knee to accomplish what maybe less than 0.1% of the entire world can do, which is a full range pistol squat body weight over reps. I mean, that is such a high level activity, even though you might not think it is, because zillions of CrossFitters can do it. It's not asked of a lot of needs. So it needs to be functioning at like really high levels. So if there's any deficiency in tissue length on the anterior, structure of your thigh, that compressive force on your patella is going to be huge. There's other, there's patellar tracking issues that can occur. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can occur. So until that tissue length is awesome, I mean, I would want to just check that off the list first for the first, week or 2 or 3, just to make sure it's awesome.
I would add to that too, that, when we're talking about a front squat or even a pistol squat, your glutes become what's called passively insufficient, in that because of the depth of the squat that you're going into, you're more than likely going to posteriorly pelvic tilt, which will basically translate all of the force that you were loading into your glutes just straight to the quad and to the knee. And so instead of having sort of that, two engines doing work, meaning that the quad and the glute, now it's just one engine that's really working until you get up past a certain point. So you could probably get to just below parallel and be okay, but as soon as you start going deep, now we're talking about shifting all that force and translating all of that to the knee, which is why it is important in that circumstance to, as Marcus was alluding to, not only have the length, but even the strength in the quads too. So been focused on those glutes for so long, you forgot about the quads. The baby's creeping in.
It's so cute.
She just learned to walk this week.
Oh.
So,
That's awesome.
that's good stuff.
Sorry,
I like troubleshooting
this
kind of stuff, though.
Yeah, I know that was a really complex question, so I didn't mean to like hijack. I know that
no, that's the point of this, is to just troubleshoot it and to talk about these things. So
what I guess just like what is that, Thomas? Like, what is something that I could look into? I mean, we have unlimited resources, and that's where a lot of I get my like PT is some really good people online or like Instagram. Some people that we follow, and what is that Thomas test?
I'll be happy to put that link into chat right now for so.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, that just something that could kind of educate myself on, because that's a whole part of, that's the biggest thing with weightlifting, is you got to be educated before you do it.
Yep.
This is going to be a video on the Thomas test for hip flexor.
Sorry.
I was like, wait, we got somebody new in the chat.
Yeah, some foreign guy.
That's a video that I just pulled up to get the link here.
Cool. Any other comments from the gallery? Aaron, Rachel, y'all have any questions for anybody? If you don't, that's fine. No pressure.
I know my brother's going to kill me on this, but I mean, he started doing CrossFit and immediately, started having different symptoms because he hadn't done it before. And I know that was a big challenge for him. He's working through some back pain and shoulder and other issues. But maybe Aaron, you could say if you were shocked as far as like, your body was kind of shocked in terms of the new movements that were required of you when you started CrossFit, if you want to talk about it.
No, I just, I agree. I thought CrossFit, when I first started doing it, you see people doing it and it's very like, you look at it and you're like, I could never do that. It's scary. It's overwhelming. But you go into it and everyone's super helpful. Everyone's super supportive. At least where I went, it was relatively small classes. So you always had, your instructors watching you on your form and everything. My biggest thing when I first started doing it was just the overhead squat. My balance was awful. And even to this day, like anytime I put any sort of weight over my head and try to do a squat, it's awful. I can't do it. But yeah, somewhere along the line, I did something to my back. It wasn't even at CrossFit. I was just doing something to my tire. And it's 2 years later, it's still bothering me. And I can see that there's like, I don't know, Lauren, you probably know what it's called, but I can even see that there's like, just looking at my body, there's like, it's misshapen in the hips. Like my belly button's even kind of off. So I'm just trying to get through that.
That's cool, Mo, man, that you're kind of discovering those things. And I always think it takes a lot of courage to do something that you've never done before and be really open to instruction and education and being really bad at something too initially. So yeah, it'll get better. That's cool.
Yeah. And I think, for him, the imbalance that he has in his body, we grew up as tennis players, so yes, it's a little bit more of a balanced sport, but it's still dominant to your, right hand or left hand, depending on what you are. But, he's experiencing kind of these SI joint problems because of the imbalance. And, I've tried to help him working through those things, but, definitely getting, having somebody that can coach you that really knows it when you do go back into some more heavier lifting is going to be key to make sure that you're not compensating.
All right. Well, we are running up on an hour of time here. So I want to thank everybody for joining in, for good insights from Marcus, from a cool story from Reese, and good comments from everybody. So we're going to do these every Friday morning, hopefully have on different guests and talk some PT stuff and also unrelated stuff that, is just kind of cool to talk about. So thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, and support, don't forget Turbo Coffee, follow them on Instagram, and buy some coffee online.